They're going to call Lowe's, yeah, but not in.
Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Lynchburg. Here we gather in a spirit of freedom and friendship. Whoever you are, whatever your beliefs, whatever your age, and whomever you love, you are welcome here. As we work together for justice, compassion, and peace, we also acknowledge with humility that our buildings sit on land originally part of the Monacan Nation. My name is Gary Duvall. I've been a member of First Unitarian for 49 years, and I'm a member of the Sunday Services Committee. If you're with us for the first time, we are glad you chose to be here this morning to participate in the service for this church community that we love so much. We would be happy to tell you more about our community during virtual social time following the service. If you would like to receive our monthly newsletter and Friday email updates, please fill out the virtual visitor card found on our website at uulynchburg.org under Sunday services held via Zoom. You may also wish to join our Facebook group. Please note that the order of service is in the chat to the right of your screen if you're using a computer. And I didn't get any announcements beforehand. Does anyone have an announcement? Okay. I invite us now to enter into the service by taking some slow, calming breaths, releasing all that might keep us from being fully present this morning. As we enter our time of worship, we light the flame of our chalice, sharing these words. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, O Spirit of life. Our opening words this morning were written by Elena Westbrook. In a world ravaged by violence, by hatred, by conflicts that seem eternal and insoluble, sometimes the only thing we can do is be still for a moment to remind ourselves what is real. The sun that rose this morning, the dirt under our feet, the air whispering in and out of our lungs. This hour, just try to be present in each moment as it unfolds. Your simple attention is what makes these moments holy. Our opening hymn is number 190, Light of Ages and of Nations.
Good morning. Welcome to A Time for All Ages. This morning, I'd like to talk a little bit more and expand a little bit more on February's Soul Matters theme, widening the circle. When we widen our circle, we are making it bigger, bigger and bigger to include more stories of the people who lived before us. These stories tell a lot about those who came before and how some of the stories that we're told aren't necessarily the complete and whole truth. Next Sunday, we'll be sharing a multi-generational service that lifts up some of the stories and voices from Black history that haven't always been told or heard. But today's story is about a more famous individual in American history, Harriet Tubman, who lived during the Civil War. Harriet Tubman knew that no person should be enslaved. To be enslaved meant to be owned by someone else. She knew it was wrong for one person to own another person, as if they were a cow or a horse or a wagon. She knew it was wrong when she was about 7 years old, and the person who owned her treated her horribly. She knew it was wrong for one person to work in the fields or the house all day long without getting any pay. She knew it was wrong that owners broke families apart, selling children away from parents and wives away from their husbands. Often, Harriet thought about freedom, Sometimes at night, she would dream that she was flying. In her dream, she would come into a big wall that she couldn't pass. On the other side of the wall, there were women wearing white, reaching up their arms to help pull her over it. When Harriet was a young woman, she learned that she and 3 of her brothers were about to be sold to a plantation in the Deep South. She would never see her family or her husband again. It was time for Harriet to escape from slavery, and she knew that it would be very dangerous. White people would hire slave catchers to chase after the people who escaped, and the slave catchers brought dogs to sniff where people had escaped and find them. If you were caught, you would be cruelly punished or even killed, and Harriet knew that she must be free. So she made an escape plan with her brothers. She didn't even tell her husband. She was a free African American. He was a free African American, and Harriet knew that he might not want to leave home. But Harriet thought that she had to leave. She knew it. While he was sleeping, she slipped out of their home at night and met her brothers. As they walked through the woods, her brothers became very afraid. It was dangerous to try to escape slavery. Finally, her brothers gave up and decided to go back and brought Harriet back with them. So then Harriet knew what she must do. She must escape by herself. She couldn't wait any longer or she would be sold. Harriet's father, Ben, had taught her all about the woods. She knew which plants and berries were safe to eat. She knew how to walk silently without making a sound. She knew how to imitate bird calls. And she knew that moss only grows on the north side of trees and how to feel for the moss to guide her on cloudy nights. And most of all, she knew how to find the Big Dipper and the North Star so she could follow it to freedom. Walking through the woods at night, Harriet only knew one place to go for help, to the home of an abolitionist. And this is someone who believed that slavery was terribly wrong and worked to end it. This woman happened to be part of the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad wasn't a real train. It was a network of people in the South and the North, men, women, Black and white, who worked together to help enslaved people escape to freedom. Their homes were the stations on the Underground Railroad, hiding places where people could safely rest and eat while traveling north. Harriet traveled from station to station, walking for hundreds of miles until she finally reached a place without slavery where she could live free. Harriet was free. She could choose whom she would work for, and she would be paid, and no one would ever again whip her or mistreat her. She could come and go as she pleased. She could set up a comfortable life for herself and live happily and safely for the rest of her life. But Harriet could not be comfortable knowing there were still more than 2 million people enslaved. She knew slavery was wrong. She knew she had to go back and help lead other people to freedom, no matter how dangerous it was. And so Harriet became a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She went back to the South again and again. She led more than 300 people out of slavery to freedom by following that North Star and walking to safe stations along the Underground Railroad. Pictures of Harriet were posted throughout the South, where she was wanted as a criminal. She carefully disguised herself, though, so she would not be recognized. Sometimes she dressed in a man's suit. Sometimes she dressed as an old woman. The people she helped to flee hid in barns and in secret rooms and in churches. They walked, they took trains, or they rode in horse-drawn wagons hidden under blankets or sacks of potatoes and onions. People would get scared along the Underground Railroad and wonder if they should turn back. They were exhausted and often near starvation. But Harriet encouraged them to keep on going to freedom in the North. To keep babies from crying or making noises that might expose a hiding place, Harriet gave them medicine to help them sleep. Sometimes she carried babies in a cloth bag tied to her waist. Harriet Tubman risked her life over and over and over again because she knew that no adult or child should ever be enslaved. Then the Civil War came, and when it had ended, slavery was over in the United States. The law had been changed, and no longer could any person own another person. Harriet went on to live many years after that, working for the rest of her life to help the people that were once enslaved begin their lives in freedom. Once, she gave a speech where she said, "I was a conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, And I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never, ever lost a passenger. Today, we must continue to tell these stories from history of experiences from people like Harriet Tubman and so many others. We must tell the whole true story of what life was like for those who were mistreated, those who were enslaved, and those whose lives were in danger for simply being who they were. As we continue with our theme of widening the circle, let us remember those whose lives bear witness to the truth of the American experience. Blessed be.
The ministries of our church are supported by the love, talents, and efforts of our many volunteers and staff, as well as the monetary support of our members and friends. If you found this church to be of value in your life, then I invite you to use the donate button found at uulynchburg.org at the bottom of the menu on the left for donations to First Unitarian. Just click the button to give generously through any credit card or directly from your bank. You can also send a check to First Unitarian Church, 818 Court Street, Lynchburg, Virginia, 24504. We receive these monetary gifts along with the gifts of your time, work, and creativity, which also sustain our church. As together we give generously to support our congregation, let us also commit ourselves to a unity of spirit to make manifest a more just, peaceful, and loving world. Meditation this morning was written by Elizabeth Tarbox. Each day, I'm newly reminded of my unworthiness. A dozen thoughts misspoken. Another day when the good I do falls short of the good that I could do. Myriad small interchanges. Moments of sharing that strain to the breaking point my desire to be generous, hopeful, and kind. Months of careful work, lost by moments impatient, a careless word. But when I'm here at the edge of creation, breaking with the small tide over the sand, the need to do good rolls away. The question of what is right diminishes to insignificance and is easily borne away by the tiny waves. Here, where no words are spoken, none are misspoken. I am with the broken stubble of the marsh grass that holds on through the wrecking wind and the burning flood. I am with the grains that mold themselves around everything, accepting even so unworthy a foot as mine, holding and shaping it until it feels that it belongs. I stand somewhere between truth and vision, and what I don't know ceases to embarrass me, because what I do know is that the water feels gentle like a lover's touch, and the sand welcomes it. What I have done or failed to do has left no noticeable mark on creation. What I do or don't do is of no moment now. Now, I am here and grateful to be touched, calmed, and healed by the immense pattern of the universe. And when I die, it will be an honor for my blood to return to the sea and my bones to become the sand. Reassured, I'm called back to my life, to another day. Dr. Kim Sinha has been a member of First Unitarian for a number of years. Her wife Courtney currently serves as president of the congregation. Kim will talk about critical race theory and the teaching of African American history in Virginia's public schools. Kim's been a member of the Lynchburg City School Board since February 2018. Kim?
Can you see that? Here we go. Or are you just seeing, are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that. When Gary approached me about speaking and gave me a number of dates to choose from, I picked this date in February because it is Black History Month, and there's a lot of talk about the teaching of American history, and it's kind of become a real flashpoint, particularly in our schools. Okay, why isn't this advancing? There we go. So, so today I want to talk to you a little bit about the teaching of American history and the controversy over critical race theory. And I'll be talking a little bit from my perspective as a school board member, because I probably won't be as tuned into the issue if I weren't on the school board. But I want to make it clear that I'm not speaking for the school board. These are simply my observations and thoughts. And although I'm trying to do as complete a telling of this as possible, it's just too big a topic to do that. So I just put that out there as a disclaimer. The debate over how to teach history of race in America is entangling our local school boards and engulfing national politics. Now, my perspective is also shaped by my education. I'm a sociologist. I'm trained to view things through a sociological lens to understand the connections between the forces of society and the personal lives of individuals when history meets biography, if you will. You are who you are as an individual is also the you shaped by your immediate surroundings, your family, your friends, your country, the world as a whole. And I would add the social media you consume, because that seems to be a dominant influencer in our current life. When we understand historical and social contexts, we're better equipped to look at our actions and the actions of our community as a result of systems which can be changed, rather than seeing them as inherent qualities of our humanity. Now, we recognize this connection between history and personal biography by how we look at our generations, because we know they are shaped by time and events. So, you know, we have the Depression era people, the post World War II baby boomers, of which I'm one, and so on. So we all have this sociological notion of collective history shaping a person's personal history. So grandstanding over US history is now a central plank in the Republican strategy to reclaim Congress in this year's midterm elections. Already helped Republicans to victories, notably here in Virginia, where new Governor Glenn Youngkin has promised and has fulfilled that to the degree possible, to purge schools of divisive attempts to examine the legacies of racial injustice and white supremacy in US history. Now, the key word that keeps coming up in all of these conversations that I've seen in all of my reading is this term divisive. What is divisive? Just a little humor for you. So why is this battle really coming to a head now? Why is there so much more passion over how we understand our past and how we describe our present? What's at stake in all this? It's really important to understand these things. What changes when a story a country tells about itself changes? And what changes when who has the power to tell the story changes? And why is now the moment for this collision? Well, it's been long in the making. We had the election of the first Black president, which some heralded as the advent of the post-racial society, but for others, it was a real challenge to, their notions of the power structure of the country. And similarly, several legal and social controversies that had been brewing ever since the 70s, but are accelerating with time, regarding reverse racism, began to spotlight or shine a light on whites' increasing concern about anti-white bias. It's a real thing. Like when Obama became president, certainly there was a Black backlash because he's liberal and we have these political tribes, but there was also, this mass effort to otherize him. He's not from this country, the birther movement. He's from Kenya. He's a Muslim. He's, whatever. He just wasn't American. And I think a lot of that does stem from kind of racial notions. And we had, Unite the Right that emerged, and largely, triggered by the removal of Confederate statues. It gets back again to our history and how it revolves in the present. And then we had Black Lives Matter, which has been around for a while, but it really, really gained traction 2 years ago. And as we see more, thanks to mobile phones and ubiquitous cameras to film everything, we can see life more from a African American or minority perspective. And so for the first time ever, support for Black Lives Matter passed the 50% mark, with more white people embracing it than ever before. And certainly demography has a lot to do with it. I studied demography, and we have a saying, demography is destiny. And over the last 40 years, we've seen a real decline in the share of white people in the American population. And that has created a real feeling of fear of being replaced. And again, this feeling that, that what's good for somebody else must be bad for me. In fact, in 2011, Michael Norton and Samuel Summers of the Harvard Business School went about to really measure to what extent this belief about the increasing prevalence of anti-white bias is shared in the country, and how it reflects a view of racism as a zero-sum game, which basically is summed up as less against you means less against me. Somehow by expanding rights for someone else is somehow taking away rights for me. We went through this with the marriage debate, that somehow expanding the right to marry for same-sex couples would do harm to marriage for heterosexual couples. Well, that didn't happen. I mean, it's just not the case. And it's this binary thinking, which I've come to see is very common, a very common way of thinking. There's an us and a them, and what is good for them is bad for us. If you're not for something, then you must be against it, And white Americans perceive increases in racial equality as threatening their dominant position in American society, and they're likely to perceive that actions taken to improve the welfare of minority groups must come at their expense. And of course, perhaps the most triggering thing to create this current battle to a head over history was the release of the 1619 Project, which coincided with the August 2019 marking of the 400th anniversary of bringing the first enslaved Africans to Virginia. Now, what the 1619 Project did was aimed to just tell another side of America's founding, not replace what our founding is, but just another thread of it from the perspective of enslaved people and slavery as a way of life, as an economic system, and all that it made possible to make America the place it is today. But it created such an intense backlash and was just so unsettling. It really surprised me at how triggered certain people were by this, as if it was, the whole, if you embrace the 1619 Project, then you are disavowing our original, our original founding myths or whatever, or stories. And so, to quote the coordinator of this whole thing, whether you're progressive or conservative, many white Americans have a vested interest in the mythology of American exceptionalism. Who doesn't want to be proud of their country and our greatness, and that we're this pure, beneficent nation, right? I mean, people really want to hold on to that we're the world's best hope. And the 1619 Project just completely dismantles that narrative. And that's just too much for some people to accept. You remember when Ronald Reagan won the presidency, he did it because he had us believe again that America will always be the shining city on the hill. And modern Americans interpret the city on the hill phrase as a premonition of America's greatness, an early statement of the new nation's providential mission. And this is what makes the 1619 Project so disturbing, because it removes America and the American project from the place we've traditionally held it, the city on the hill, the act of divinity, the act of providence. It puts it down here in a valley of normal, everyday human beings. Now, I've been reading this book John Meacham wrote of Thomas Jefferson. It's really good. It's really big, so I take breaks in between to read other books. But, even as I was reading this, I thought, Thomas Jefferson was a great man, but he had a lot of free time to pursue the things that he did. And, that's what the 1619 Project does. It goes right to the root. And you see it. It goes, when you're talking about Thomas Jefferson, he was brilliant and certainly had attributes that we would describe as good. George Washington, similarly, having attributes that we would describe as good. Courageous. He gave up the presidency, didn't declare himself a king. But what does it mean to know that without enslavement, without the destruction of Black families, without the exploitation of Black labor, without labor guaranteed through torture, these men would not exist as we know them today? Thomas Jefferson wasn't moonlighting as a slaveholder. Neither was George Washington. That was their career. That was how they garnered the resources to go off and do other great things that we so admire and praise. So what does it mean to know that your founder's occupation was slaveholding? What does it mean to have to accept the fact that the deadliest war in our country's history for Americans was launched to preserve enslavement? Now, some people might think I'm suggesting that we cancel Thomas Jefferson, and I'm not saying that at all. I think he still stands up there as a great founder and great thinker, but we can't set aside. I mean, I think of everything I could do if I didn't have to do everyday things, even in this current convenient world that we live. So just imagine that. So we get to critical race theory, which I'm not fully sure anybody really understands what it is. But it is a way of understanding America's legal system, because it's a theory in law that so it was developed by former Harvard law professor Derek Bell and other scholars in the 70s and 80s. And it examines the ways in which racism is embedded into American law and other modern institutions for the maintaining the dominance of white people. In a year or so ago, people hadn't even heard of it yet, but Republicans have whipped up this moral panic that CRT is being rammed down the throats of children. And they caricature it as teaching Black children to internalize victimhood and white children to self-identify as oppressors. CRT has become this catch-all buzzword for any teaching in schools about race and American history. And it's been loosely tied to concepts such as equity and anti-bias training for teachers. One of the most vocal people is Patty Hidalgo Menders, Loudoun County, who's made a name for herself. She's quoted as saying, "They may not call it critical race theory, but they're calling it equity, diversity, inclusion. They use culturally responsive training for their teachers. It is fundamentally CRT. It's dividing our children into victims and oppressors. And what's a child supposed to do with that?" Well, I'm not so sure that accusation is true, but that's how it's been perceived and defined. And here's just a nice quick graphic to show that, there was very little Google searching over or talk about CRT, and then all of a sudden it exploded. So it's a fairly manufactured thing, but it's in response to all these events that have been long in coming and converging and taking shape. So enter Glenn Youngkin, who is believed to have won by latching on to parental concerns about schools, school closings, masks, and this racial aspect of it, the teaching of American history. Now, he made this claim that we have critical race theory in our curriculum, and it's all out there. You can go to websites, it's there. It's very transparent, but it's not critical race theory. Now, not coincidentally, at the same time that the 1619 Project came out, Ralph Northam issued an executive order to establish a commission on African American history. And again, he tied it with this 400th anniversary of the first slaves being brought to Virginia. And he recognized that we need a complete teaching and a thorough teaching of this history. And now there is a CRT that's in this curriculum, but it's not critical race theory. It's called culturally responsive teaching. Now, that may be a new concept to you, but it's basically teaching in a way that draws on the cultural and life experiences of the students you're teaching, to help them find and use their own voices, to be represented, to examine issues through a multicultural lens, just looking at different sides of things. And get them engaged in thinking to make it relevant, and so that they can actively participate in their learning. And it's been shown successful at reaching students. Now, when you look, and I don't know how easy it is to see these charts, but when you look at the city's demographics compared to who's enrolled in our schools are 50% African American. So why would we want to use culturally responsive teaching to relate to our students, to make it more relevant to them? to reach them where they are in terms and settings and events that they can understand and relate to. Well, for some people, that's just a bridge too far. That's just too much. And again, it's not intended to say all white people are racist and they're oppressors and all you blacks are just poor victims. No, it's not meant to victimize anybody. It's not meant to condemn anybody. It's just meant to relate to other people's lived experiences and what those mean and how they tie to current events. And again, these are all at grade level too. So critical race theory is really a college level thing, and it's just not part of the K through 12 curriculum. Just the same though, when right after being sworn in, his executive order number 1 was ending the use of inherently divisive concepts. And again, that term divisive, including critical race theory, and restoring excellence in K-12 public education in the Commonwealth. Well, I'm all for excellence in K-12 education, but I'm really concerned about what this sense of divisiveness is. What does it mean? Where does it coming from? And is it in the eye of the beholder? So if you look more deeply at the full text of his executive order, inherently divisive concepts appear to be any instructing students to only view life through the lens of race, and presumes that some students are consciously or unconsciously racist, sexist, or oppressive, and that others are victims. And again, it's not the only view, it's one of many. So that only, it's like as if, again, it comes to this binary thinking that if we're going to teach this way, we're getting rid of that way. No, I think we're just adding, we're widening. And I don't think people can see that. At least that's my view. And maybe I'm naive, maybe we are, but I don't think we are. But for some people, it's very threatening. They see this as a replacement for what they've learned growing up. Now, Nicole Hannah-Jones, I decided to quote from her and allow her to speak for it, because her whole intention was, yes, to provoke, to have people engage in this thought experiment of how, if we were to teach American history through the lens of enslavement and through Black lives, lived experiences of Blacks, Africans, and Americans, what would that look like? What would it be? How would it change how we view our country? And that's really disturbing to a lot of people. And basically, again, this is kind of wrapped up in that critical race theory notion that if we teach the true history of our country, if we teach the facts, then the logical conclusion is that all children will come to is that we are fundamentally a racist nation. And so we're being told or asked or warned not to teach those facts. And that's basically what a lot of the opposition is about. And if you look at the laws that are being passed, again, it's not that anybody saying these things aren't factual. It's just what will these facts, how will these facts be interpreted by students, or how will they be related to students by teachers? And there are examples of one-off of people doing horrible things. Recently, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, there was a story of a woman, a teacher, I think in the DC area, who had her students, really portray things in a way that would have been very unsettling and inappropriate for them in that regard. So, we wouldn't want things like that. But the curriculum is spelled out and it's very clear. So this racist nation thing really gets to the crux of the matter, I think. So last November, a group of conservative parents presented the school board with a written resolution, which we haven't adopted, but I asked for a copy of it here, and I can share with you the whole thing, but here are the basic points, and you can read through them if you'd like, and most of them are fine, but the two that I really don't understand are on this list are that the United States is fundamentally inherent. We should refrain from teaching that the United States is fundamentally and inherently racist, or that capitalism is racist. Now, I'm really puzzled over these points because, it's hard for me to imagine that there are people who believe that the US is not fundamentally and inherently racist. I mean, really? I see that as very naive. As for capitalism, the formula for profit is revenue minus costs, and slaveholders happened upon the world's most winning formula. In very stark and quantifiable terms, the exploitation, enslavement, and murder of African American and indigenous American people turned blood into wealth for white power structure. And it wasn't just the Southern economy that benefited from slavery. The North saw its benefits too, extending, for example, to the whole textile manufacturing and exports. So my theory on this is that there are people who are so deeply invested and identified with the American myth that sitting on a hill, this benevolent, good, morally right nation, they're so identified with that to criticize it, to find fault with it, to speak of this ugly truth of ours is to say that about them. It's like you're talking about them. That if my country is racist, then I'm racist too. Now, I don't think one implies the other. So I don't know. Again, that's the only thing I can come to is this conclusion, and why people are so emotionally charged over this notion. That's just my theory. Now, again, the more things change. So this is back in integrating schools to, here we go again. It's like we keep fighting the same things over and over. And I don't know where it will go. I don't know where we go from here. We communicate through memes, and this is a powerful one. If this little girl could go to school, be the first Black in her school, certainly our children, our white children especially, can learn about this. But we have to remember that Ruby Bridges is only a couple years older than me. Our history is closer than most of us think, and it's still impacting us. So that's about as far as I got with my talk. I don't know if you want to ask questions or anything, but I don't know where this battle will go. It's wanting to go in some pretty chilling directions of, having snitch lines to tell on your teachers if you don't like what they're teaching, which can be very frightening for a teacher. And what can you say and what can't you say, and what, again, who gets to interpret what's divisive? I know myself as a lesbian, just my mere presence to people who find that offensive is divisive. I don't have to do anything but show up. It's divisive. Am I being divisive? I don't think so, but I'm viewed as divisive just because. So that becomes the crux of the matter. How do we define what is divisive? And that's where I think the focus of this debate will move forward. I still think that we will have a clearer, more full, complete, added to history that tells life, the lived experiences of others in a way that it hasn't been done before. And that's a good thing. And I think in the end, good will come out of this, but we're in for a rough patch of backlash and pushback on how we teach this history. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say.
Thank you, Kim. There will be time after the service for feedback and discussion. Our closing hymn is number 121, We'll Build a Land. As our service draws to a close, we extinguish the flame of our chalice as we say these words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. May we hear the melody of life and find ourselves singing harmony. May we be open to the dissonances in the song of the land and its people, that we might be part of the world's urging towards justice, peace, and love. May we feel in our bones the rhythms of life and the land and find ourselves dancing.